Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm not sure if you can hear the music that's playing right now in the background. Probably not. So, if you hear the music in the background, the song you hear right now is a song that my mother used to play for me when I was younger, and actually when I was a child. So, if you are Nigerian, for sure you know about Prince Nico, Sweet Mother, and I not gonna forget you for the suffer way you suffer for me. This is a song. It's like a lullaby. But I'm playing this song right now because I'm thinking about my heritage, who I am as Uchechukwu and Joku, as an Igbo man living in America. Born in Nigeria but raised here in this country, and it's one of those things we don't talk about, especially a lot of younger Nigerians. And even those who are now coming into middle age, like I am, who've been here all these years, and really thinking about what does it mean to be Nigerian? What does it mean to be African in the midst of being in a society that looks at you as African American? And this evening, I'm going to go through my own personal therapy session. And before I even start, let me go ahead and welcome everyone who is here this evening. If you're here listening to this and you came across this title, this is a very, really unique title. So this is one of those things where you probably be like, okay, what are they talking about? What is Biafra? And it's one of those things where I definitely have to give you some background information so you understand. But a lot of people still don't know about Biafra. They don't even know about the Nigerian Civil War that happened in the late 60s. That honestly, I didn't even really understand and know until I was much older, and didn't even realize there were people here in this country who were very aware of it and were protesting and doing a lot of things to try to bring more attention to the Civil War that was happening in Nigeria. And one thing I'm gonna be honest with you, I will never be able to do it full justice, as far as what occurred and everything that happened, because it's something that wasn't really spoken about in my household. Now, you would hear stories more along the lines of during the war, but never any real details about what was really happening, and like what was the political climate, what led to it. These were things that just weren't really talked about. And it's interesting because here I am now as a grown man, a father. I have my own children, and I'm still piecing together what transpired, what happened, what led to it, what people went through. A lot of my piecing is from news reports. And this evening, I want to share with you some things, like my journey as a man who's in his 40s, and the things that I picked up over the years about my identity as an Igbo man. I'm an Igbo man. It doesn't even matter, how what and I'm going to talk about that too, even what it means to be Igbo. But right now, first, before I even start, I just want to make sure that Facebook is working fine, and I have a feeling it's not. And again, I think I'll share this with you guys. Every so often, I'm like, what's going on with Facebook? How come I can't get Facebook to work properly? And it's like an ongoing dilemma for me. Let me see here. I think I might have, no, I don't know. Facebook, I think we might not have Facebook this evening, which really sucks because I've been having a lot of action on Facebook as far as just the extent of just the growth of my Facebook channel, my Facebook page. So let me try this one more time. Let me see what's going on here. Let me see here. And please be patient with me. I'm just trying to make sure I know what's going on with Facebook, and I'm going to just do one more thing here. And if in the next less than 1 minute, if this doesn't work out properly, then I'm just going to go ahead and just start the my conversation with you this evening. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go into Facebook. I'm going to go into my page and see what is the wahala happening here. Why are we not showing? I don't know. let me see what I can do here. I think I have one other option. Yeah, it's saying it's happening now, but it's not showing. I don't know. Okay. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to go into my YouTube and see if I can just plop in the link from YouTube into Facebook. So if anyone who's interested to see what's happening, hopefully then, let me see, copy URL link from there. I'm going to go into my Facebook and I'm just going to plop in here this and post it. All right. So it is what it is. And again, what I'll do is at a later point, I will post the full link after the video is, after this episode is done into Facebook. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So I'm going to give it a full bio. I'm 46 years old. I was born in Nigeria. I was born in Kano. Actually, no, I wasn't born in Kano. I'm tripping. I lived in Kano as a boy, but I was born in Zaria in Kaduna. And when I was really, really young, my family moved to Saudi Arabia. My father was a student in Saudi. And from that point on, it's a typical immigrant story. You know, for a lot of Nigerians, it doesn't matter where you go around the world, you're going to find Nigerians. And specifically, you're going to find Igbos. We're everywhere. And it's interesting because we're a wandering people. We have the ability to find our way to anywhere and settle and be prosperous. It's just one of the things. This is not me bigging up just Igbos. It's just something that's a natural fact. I've seen Igbos in China. I've seen Igbos. I've been around the world in places where I run into other Nigerians and they're Igbo. And I'm like, what the heck are you doing here? And they look at me like, what you doing here? And it's like, okay, this is who we are. And growing up, there was always a sense of pride of being Igbo. And it was a big thing. You know, Igbos are very colorful, very boisterous, very industrious, all about the academics and schoolwork and just success. That's the push with a typical Igbo household or Igbo family. And I remember just knowing that I had to succeed without a question. Whatever I did, I had to do really, really well. But if I didn't do really, really well, my father would come down hard on me. My family would come down hard on me. But the expectation was always that, you know, that I was always going to be on point. Like that was not even a question. And I remember when I first heard about the war, I was really confused because my mother was talking about those days during the war. And I was like, what is she talking about? What war? You know, and I was young. I was like probably like around the first time I heard about the war, I was probably maybe say about 9 or 10. And again, it almost became kind of like that, you know, proverbial, you know, when I was your age, we used to walk miles to go to wherever. So it felt like that. It wasn't a real thing. It didn't become a real thing for me until I got to college. And I'll tell you what happened when I got to college. Because mind you, I'm 46. So the internet and all that and being able to access information wasn't that really available in the 90s into the early 2000s. So you had to be like in college or in a space where computers and the internet was accessible like that. And I remember when I first came across that, I want to give a major big up to my brother Solomon. You know, he says here his dad's from Benin and mother's from Lagos. You know, Omo Yoruba. So a fellow Nigerian. You know, and I just remember getting to the point where in college I'd had professors, especially my Africana Studies professors, who would say certain things. You know, they'll ask me, what tribe are you from? And I'll say, yeah, I'm Igbo. Igbos. You guys are very interesting. You have a very interesting history. And I'll be like, okay, interesting history. And I didn't catch on. You know, it wasn't until I had a professor, economics professor, when I was in, I took some courses in California at Cal State Dominguez Hills, that he started talking about the Jews of Africa. The Jews of Africa. And I used to be like, what is he talking about? And at first I thought he was like being insulting, because there is a stereotype about Igbos, about being, you know, all about their business, all about their money, you know, all about being successful, you know. So I thought, okay, this is kind of like a shot at, you know, that stereotype about Igbos. And but he kept on saying like Jews of Africa, like you need to look deeper into your history and what you guys did during the war. And I was like, and at that point in time, but mind you, now I'm in my early 20s, and I still didn't really understand. I didn't do a deeper dive. And so I was like, okay. So, back then, you go on Yahoo or Jeeves or whatever way you surf the internet. And I would go on the internet, I started looking up Biafra. Wasn't much. But I started seeing these old clips and these crazy pictures of these children that were who had kwashiorkor, like the swollen stomach from starvation. I was like, what is this? And they were like the Igbo people of Biafra during the war in the late 60s. So I was like, that's not us. I was like, no, that's not us. What are you talking about? I'm Igbo. I know who we are. That's not us. But I started reading, and I learned about this thing that happened. Like it was bordering on genocide. It was crazy, and I remember reading it. And I was like, oh my goodness. But at that point in time, it didn't hit me about the time frame. I didn't put two and two together about like my parents and that time frame. My mother is 22 years older than me. She had me when she was 22. So I have a point of reference for my mother. And it's funny because, so that means my mother is 60, is 22 years older than me. She's like 68. And it's funny because during this time frame, she would have been right in the middle of her teens. And this war took place over a period of time. So we're talking about like her early teens, maybe 12, 13, all the way through into her teenage years. And then my father, who's 72, was in his late teens. And I know now that he fought. He was a soldier. He was a soldier doing that battle. And what was interesting about that is my brain couldn't connect because I'm looking at these pictures and I'm asking myself like, wait a minute, my father was a teenager in this war. My mother was a teenage girl through this war. I still didn't have the full context. But over the years now, through my own research and my study, I realized this was a serious thing that happened. And there are things that have come across my mind like PTSD and what was because now we talk about soldiers who go to war and come back, and I'm thinking my father went through that. The PTSD that would have happened to my mother as a young girl. She lost her brothers. She lost brothers in that war. And all these things, and they lost family members, and children died. All these crazy things were happening. There was starvation. So I'm saying all of this because this is the context of me understanding my Igbo heritage, especially from the Nigerian Civil War. And I'm not going to get into like what happened, and you can look that up. But there was a war that happened, and that war was horrific. And but what's interesting is over the past number of years, I've become very curious about who Igbos are, especially as a teacher. As a teacher, especially one of my loves is history and understanding your origin story, who you are in your culture and all these different things. And one of the things that's come up over the years, I've heard over and over again, is this whole notion of like this at one point in time I would say was an affinity the Igbos had for the Jewish faith. That's how I looked at it. Igbos had an affinity for the Jewish faith, and Igbos were converting to Judaism. And that's something that is now, if you look it up, it's all over. You can find a lot of information about that. Israel themselves have been in great debate about whether or not there's a claim for a Jewish identity amongst the Igbo people. So I think I stand on the sideline watching this, and I come from a very diverse family background. My father was Igbo, but he was also a Muslim. We lived in Saudi Arabia. I've gone a Hajj to Mecca with him. We've walked around the Kaaba. I've done this with my father, And then my mother was raised Methodist. So, and then she's also Pentecostal. So I grew up in the church and in Islam and all these cross intersecting spaces. So now to have this other thing here that people are saying, hey, there's a Jewish connection in there. In my mind, I always thought I'll be honest with you. I always thought it was like, okay, more of a affinity for and a thing to convert to. Never did I really think it was a real grounding in an origin story behind it, you know. But over the years, that has changed. Relatively new years, relatively recent years, that's changed because I've been spending time trying to understand and reading up on and watching videos and documentaries, trying to understand where does this come from, you know. And there's been a lot of interesting evidence being provided. I'll give you one. My father did. I mean, he didn't tell me this, but I overheard it. I mean, you know how you sit at the footstool of your parents, and you listen to them having their conversation with their friends. I remember my father once being asked by one of his friends, like, "Why did you become a Muslim? What was it about Islam? Like, you're Igbo. We're typically Christians." And he said something that was interesting. I'm paraphrasing. He was saying that converting to Islam was easy for him because there were so many things in Islam, you know, that were parallel to beliefs in Igbo culture. And he talked about like the eating of clean meats and a lot of which were considered ritualistic beliefs that exist within Islam. You know, he also talked about like, you know, things like, you know, like the circumcisions and all these different things that were these Semitic, now we know, or people would consider Semitic customs. They were already embedded in Igbo culture for millennia. So I thought that was interesting. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So, but now when I see people talk about Igbo-Jewishness, they make that connection to those, you know, Judaic customs that Igbos were practicing absent of the influence of modern day Judaism. It was just already there. People were coming in and saying, wait a minute, that's interesting. They do these things that fit into the same like circle as practices in Judaism. And the great mystery, where did that come from? Was it something that somebody brought in or something that just happened because it just happened? Like, you know, roll the dice, it just happened. So these are the big debates. I've seen videos online where Igbo people have been chastising Igbo Jews and saying, like, you know, you guys are over here, you know, just being whitewashed and you're trying so hard to fit into European culture. Why don't you just be yourself and be African and stop trying to be white? I've seen those videos. And it's funny because absent of the information and data I've been able to piece together about my Igbo heritage, I would more likely would have agreed with that. I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. You're Igbo. You're from southeastern Nigeria. That is thousands of miles away from Israel. Like, how is that even possible? But we know that scientifically, populations migrated, right? We know that, you know, and there's also very good evidence to show the patterns that people move during different conflicts in the world, including what would be called the tribes of Israel, the sons of Jacob and their children and their tribes, how they moved. So let's fast forward to today. So this morning, I'm a very early riser, and first thing in the morning, I don't know why, I'm an information junkie. So, you know, I go through my morning rituals, you know, and get ready to go to the gym, and I'm in the car driving to the gym. And I just kind of went on YouTube and just like, you know, see what first thing popped on. And a video popped on. And this video popped on, and this gentleman was talking about, that the White House recognizes Igbos as Jews. I was like, what the heck is this man talking about? So I watched the video, and he gives some information, and I was like, okay, I gotta look this up for myself. I'm gonna tell you what I looked up, okay? So what I looked up was this, and I'm gonna do a screen share. And if you listen to this on the podcast, I do apologize, but I'm gonna do my best to be descriptive as possible. So I went on to put this over here. I went on to Google, and I'm gonna tell you the keywords I typed in based from this YouTube video. And I do apologize because I'm going to, if I remember, I'll add the link to that video onto the description of this live stream after I'm done. So I typed in Biafra. Biafra was the name of the region after southeastern Nigeria, the Igbos, and those who were in the peripheral or connected to the Igbo peoples who were like wanted to secede and create their own nation. They named that nation Biafra. So you had the Biafra War. Then So what was shared in this video was a memo from Henry Kissinger, who was the U.S. Secretary of State to Richard Nixon. So this was a memo that was sent from him, from Secretary of State, to the president at the time, Richard Nixon, in 1969. So I went in there, I was like, I got to find this for myself. So I typed in Biafra, I typed in Kissinger, and I typed in Nixon. And the first thing you see on here is what? www.nixonlibrary.gov. So it doesn't get any more legit than that, because every president has their own presidential library, and you have your own online database and everything else. And this is titled U.S. Options in Biafra Relief, January 28, 1969, Nixon Library. Henry A. Kissinger, subject, U.S. Options in Biafra Relief. You asked for a study of the Biafra relief problem by January 28th. So this is Secretary Henry A. Kissinger. Now, you can see it right here. Like this, I mean, unless somebody forged this and just kind of like hacked their way in there and created this false page, this is crazy to me. So what you're seeing here is a memorandum, White House stationery, Tuesday, January 28, 1969. Memorandum. First of all, that first type line, that line that's crossed out, because at one point this was a secret document. It was classified secret. Not top secret, but secret. So I would assume it was only for the eye. It was only meant for the eyes of the president or those within his inner circle, right? So it says memorandum for the president from Henry A. Kissinger, who was secretary, and I think that's his initials in there. He was Secretary of Secretary of State. So arguably, I would say one of the top 4 or 5 most powerful people in the country, and in line of succession to presidency, if anything would happen to the president or vice president. And it says here, U.S. options in Biafra relief. So I'm just going to read a couple of these lines here so you can see, to kind of set the stage here. It says here, you asked for a study, you being, I'm assuming the president, Richard Nixon, you asked for a study of the Biafra relief problem by January 28th. A member of my staff prepared the attached survey. I've taken the liberty of underlining the most important parts. Underlying is a sketch of the background problem with a useful map. I thought it important to trace in some detail the interplay between politics and food. Each of the following tabs, however, is designed to stand alone for a quick overview. So he has the different tabs. It's all identified and everything else. I'm not sure who this person is. Authorized by NSSM, National Secret Service. I don't know, but so whoever this person is, signed it for that date. Then you can see down here, this was secret, but it was declassified in June 24th, 2003, right there. Okay, declassified. So this is for real. This is not for the public domain. So I'm gonna kind of like go through this real quickly. So this section right here, there's not an exact number of there are no exact numbers on the scale of the human tragedy gathering in Biafra. So they had no clear numbers of how many people were dying, right? But all our sources do agree that more than 1 million people are likely to be in danger of starvation over the next 2 to 3 months. The disaster certainly overshadows direct U.S. Interest in Nigeria. Okay, the disaster certainly overshadows direct U.S. interests in Nigeria, which is I always think is interesting, but there's definitely okay. Let me stop with the side comment. Let me just keep reading. There would be no question about evacuating the 5,500 U.S. citizens or sacrificing the 300 million private investments on the federal side if these stood in the way of relief. The heart of our dilemma, however, is that our instinctive moral concern and involvement with this tragedy cannot be separated from the political tangle, either in the eyes of the two sides or in the real impact of relief on the course of the war, its border consequences for Nigeria and Africa. Policy must be measured in terms of 1, its effect on our ability to get in relief, 2, long-range damage as well as the immediate danger. So trying to balance out between the politics of doing the right thing and the politics of possibly impacting relations, right? Because this war was between Biafra, who was trying to secede, and the rest of Nigeria. So we go into the background of the problem, and this is very interesting because and this is where I was saying, like, for sake of time, I don't want to go into the details of what flared up the war, but I'll tell you this. Actually, you know what? No, let me read this. We got a little bit of time. Background of the problem. Okay. The Civil War is rooted in the failure of the first generation of British Tudor politicians to make something of independence and unity. While London and Washington poured in money and high expectations, corruption grew apace and decisions were derailed of content by the tribal bickering that lay behind the facade of national parties. In one sense, the first coup in 1966 was a classic effort by young officers to set things right. But they were also Eastern Igbos who murdered with ritual flair a Northern House of Prime Minister along with premiers of the North and Western states. So when you say according to this, who threw the first rock or who threw the first punch, you had young Igbo officers who were trying to fix corruption. But, again, this is just based on what's being said here. And I've watched the documentaries. They wilded out. They wilded out and they went after the power structure. They were representative of the other major tribes, right? So this became tribal. If everybody was Igbo, this probably wouldn't have been a big deal. It would just been more debates between factions within the culture. But these were tribes. It became very tribal as a result. And then it says an Igbo general stepped in and tried honestly to hold the union together for a year, but the coup leaders went unpunished, and the spiral was rapid. 6 months later, the general was murdered, and 30 to 40,000 Igbos were savagely slaughtered in the north. So 30 to 40 Igbos were savagely slaughtered in the north. Young colonels in a coalition of west and north, of west and north, took over Lagos. The east, 2/3 Igbo, 1/3 minority tribes took back a flood of terrified Igbo refugees from the rest of the country. So what happened is, so the northern Nigeria is mostly, first of all, Nigeria is just insane as far as when you talk about tribes. I think the number that I keep hearing is about 200 distinct languages. If there was any evidence for the Tower of Babel in reality, it probably would be Nigeria or West Africa. A diversity of languages and cultures, right? But the three major cultures, it's the north, which is the biggest population are Hausas and Fulani, but mostly Hausas. Then the lower southwest are the Yorubas, and the Yorubas is not just encapsulated in the southwest of Nigeria. It flows into a big portion of West Africa, right? Then you have the Igbos that are on the southeastern side. So this is how you have the separation. So when they talk about the Igbos who in the north were slaughtered, of course in retaliation and all those things, and there was refugees coming back from the north trying to get back to Igbo land, and from there, and again you have access to this, you can read this, and all this happened and the war kicked off in 1967. So and people took sides, It says here that the federal government, so the rest of the country outnumbered the Biafrans in 2-1 in effectiveness, but French arms and high morale gave the rebels parity for the present. So what happened was, the French backed the Igbos or the southeastern part with weapons and things like that. So they put up a good fight. And you have to also understand, the leadership of these militaries were all trained together. These were all young men who knew each other, who trained together, who were friends, who were classmates. So it's funny because I've done some study of the US Civil War, and it's almost like General Lee and Ulysses Grant. They went to West Point together. They knew each other. Outside of the war, they were probably boys, probably drinking buddies. But when the war kicked off, everybody took sides. And it was pretty much what happened here. And so so a lot of things happening here. So I'm gonna skip through all this to the part that really caught my attention. So what caught my attention was this. So they go here. This section right here. So I just want to make sure here. Okay. So they talk about the two sides, right? They talk about the two sides. The two sides of the federal military government of Nigeria. So when you hear the federal, so we talk about Nigeria, right? Then they talk about the current position of their current position, in their stance, right? So then the other side is Biafra. One side is the federal government of Nigeria, who's trying to keep the country together, right? Then the other side is the secessionists, right? Those who are trying to separate, who are Biafra. So this is what blew my mind this morning. It says Biafra, approximately 3,000 square miles, 46 million people, right? Colonel Ojukwu, 35 years old, British trained. It says erstwhile playboy, so whatever that is. So I guess he was a little bit of a player, but he was a British trained soldier, 35 years old. He's the one leading. That's the Biafrans, right? So it says presides over the popular support and military morale of a people convinced that defeat means extinction. So the Igbos and those who were in that space were like, listen, if we lose this, we will be eliminated, right? So now, mind you, this is being written by persons within the United States federal government under the supervision of this U.S. Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. And it says here, the Igbos are the wandering Jews of West Africa. Gifted, aggressive, westernized, at best, envied and resented, but mostly despised by the mass of their neighbors in the Federation. They have fought well by African standards. They always got by African standards, right? They always got to minimize. Against heavy odds, their cynical public relations use of the starvation has been brilliant. But let's rewind. What is this thing here? The Igbos. The Igbos are the wandering Jews of West Africa. What is that supposed to mean? Especially seeing that Henry Kissinger is a Jew himself. And if I remember, if I read correctly, he's a Ashkenazi Jew, and he was practicing Jew, a white man, and he himself authorized this. So was that a joke? Is there something there that is there some more information that confirmed that you would put this into a memo to the United States president in talking about the two sides of a war? He could have said, a lot of things could have been said. Why was that pointed in there? Okay. And again, look at this. Right here. The Igbos are wandering Jews of West Africa. So, talk about trying to get a very clear understanding of identity. Because as a teacher, it's very, I've always prided myself on being able to unpack, when I'm teaching my students and looking and helping them understand their histories and everything else, but it's interesting when I'm not sure. I do know my tribe in Africa are Igbos. I do know that there's this thing where people are saying that, no, we are from the house of God, G-A-D, who was one of the sons of Jacob. But I'm like, but how? When? What? Wait. Because every story that I know, they're not black. But are they? Because again, this is the way I've been indoctrinated, the way we've been indoctrinated. But again, it's also something that's very hard to prove with that empirical data and hieroglyphs and writings and something that you can say, wait a minute, oh my God, we found a tablet that says these are the connections. And yes, God had a son named Eri, and Eri had a son named Inri, and they migrated to what is now known as Igbo land in southeast Nigeria. If that exists, I haven't seen it. But however, the most powerful nation in the world, even in 1969, the most powerful nation on this planet, with all its resources, all its manpower, with $300 million in investments in 1969 in Nigeria, with 55,000 U.S. citizens, they're like, yo, we got to get them out. Put in this memo about Biafra, stating the size is about 300,000 square miles with 46 million people. The leader is Colonel Juku, British trained. And then the sentence, because it is a sentence, the Igbos are the wandering, always moving around Jews of West Africa. Gifted, aggressive, westernized, at best, envied and resented by mostly despised by the mass of their neighbors in the Federation. And I'll tell you this morning I read that and I sat in my car and I looked at that over and over again. I'm like, okay, sometimes, I'm a little dyslexic. Maybe I'm just not reading it right. Maybe I'm not hearing it right. So the time, it's funny because I'm just weird like that. The time, I could tell you what time it was. So I went to the gym, worked out. I'm walking out of the gym, get in the car to get back to the house to get ready, for work. And I text my uncle. It's like 7 something. I text him. I'm gonna read to you what I text my uncle. He lives in Philadelphia, and he's my father's first cousin. And I was like, Uncle Chima, good morning. Have you seen this before? And I sent him the link to this document. Specifically, the second to last page, the second to last paragraph of page 2. I'm trying to better understand who I am as an Igbo man, especially the talk of a possible Igbo origination from the scattered houses of Israel. Henry Kissinger calls us the wandering Jews of Africa. And I could see he read it. And it probably took him about 15, 20 minutes to respond, which meant to me he said and read the document. And this was his response. Very true story. We came from God, G-A-D, who wandered away from our area at the end of, who wandered away to our area, not from, or wandered away to our area, to where we are today. At the end of the Egyptian slavery of the children of Israel. We have similar culture with present-day Jewish people. It has been proved by our early great-great-parents. He says, Google Eri in Igbo Oku. There you will find more information. Eri is a place God lived and is the origins of Igbos. Listen, I never, ever, ever, ever was given the privilege of a sit down and the instruction around this. So all this is coming to me now. And I know right now there's so much going on out there when we talk about Kyrie and the documentary Hebrews to Negroes and all that stuff. And I'll be honest with you, it's the same. It's more of the same. There's always this fight of who has the right to what. I'm choosing to walk down the lane of self-discovery and trying to understand what makes sense to me. And I'll tell you why. Because my children deserve to know. And I put no fault on my parents because I can only imagine the trauma of starvation, the deaths, and that's the thing. I don't want to get into how many people died in this war, but my parents survived, and their survival and what they learned and what they went through, you know, definitely impacted the way they raised me and my siblings and I, and also put a lot of tenacity and strength in us to be where we are, you know, as a collective. But at the same time, the pain of their experience was left shelved so that we can be raised and be put on a trajectory of success. But now, I'm looking back, like Steve Jobs says, I'm looking back trying to connect the dots. And boy, are there a lot of dots. I'm always curious because right now, is my conversations are limited to the few people that I know and family, But I'm reading more. I'm buying more books. I'm reading, and it's funny because there are people at Harvard and Yale and Oxford who's written extensively for decades about this thing. So I'm wondering again, why was this not part of our education? Why was it not even part of oral folklore? And some people might say, "Well, this is just a recent thing. Just people are just trying to like jump on the bandwagon of Israel." But before the existence of the present Israeli state, people have been writing about this and talking about this. Trying to understand why these people, what do they do? Why are they moving the way they move? Why are they mimicking Jewish customs and traditions, but absent of the presence of what is understood to be a Jewish presence? So these Africans are just doing what they came up with. It's very, very important that we step away from the noise and really dig deep and try to find as much as we can about ourselves. And I don't care if you're Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, if you're Filipino, if you're a Mongol. It doesn't matter to me. But what matters is that we, the people, are able to preserve our histories and have a clear understanding of who we are in the grand scheme of things. That's something that's very, very important. Because I look at my son, I look at my daughter, and I want them to have the full breadth of that story. And I know they'll never get the full version from me, and because I probably will never discover everything. But there's enough that is exciting that pushes my curiosity even further. I mean, for Christ's sakes, a memo in the White House literally says, because it definitely cannot. This definitely cannot be deemed as being condescending. Because again, I would think you would not want to insult your boss, who is Jewish, Henry Kissinger, but not only that, he approved this. Like, he approved this document and said, "Okay, this is good. This is ready to go to my boss, the United States President." And I said it again: Igbos are the wandering Jews of West Africa. And yeah, I think it's very, very important that I'm going to say this. Like, I have a very small audience, and those of you who are listening, and I appreciate you, because I see this definitely consistent few people here who are really paying attention. And this is not even really about me. It's really about seeking knowledge of self. But one of the things that and I'll say this, like, I've never truly felt complete, fully whole as a Nigerian child growing up in America. I always felt something was missing. I couldn't truly master my own language. I understand Igbo quite well. I am handicapped in speaking, because I always feel super. I've always felt very, very. I was non-confident. I was unconfident. Is that a word? I was not confident in my speaking, so I never spoke. You know, but my hearing is pretty impeccable, and sometimes I always wonder, like, you know, I lost out not growing up around other Nigerian children and not going to school with Nigerian kids in America, and being able to play with other Igbo children and be able to have the language. You know, I look at my kids and I don't speak Igbo to them. I don't speak the language to them. You know, and it worries me, because one of the things that's very important to me, especially as I'm getting older, is making sure that my children have the full range of the culture for them to utilize the way they want to utilize it. You know, I never want my child to say, or any of my children to say, yeah, my dad was Nigerian. That kills me. Every time I come across a kid and the kid says, yeah, my dad or my mom or my parents are Nigerian. And I'm like, beyond the borders of a country called Nigeria, there is people, a bloodline that's very, very important. As somebody who grew up, you know, under the roof of Islam and Christianity, and legacy and ancestry is such an important thing. And so for me, it's very important that we don't lose that. That we create a space, even for our children, even for ourselves. You know, I would never try to say I understand what it feels like to be African American, and those who are conscious and trying to have a good understanding of who they are and their heritage, especially after the transatlantic slavery and the enslaving of so many Africans who were forced here, with a great population of them coming from the same region that I'm from. That's why there's a lot of Igbo DNA in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, and Jamaica. Even those, and even a lot that came here, to North America. And it's just interesting that that to know that we're not just, you know, as we were taught, savages in the jungle. They were civilized by Christian missionaries. We know that's not true. We know there were kingdoms. There were peaceful people. There were warring people. There was a multitude of diversity of culture and ideas and politics and technology and all these things happening. But we've been blinded to it. It's been covered up. So the extent of, for a lot of people, their Africanness or their heritage is jungles and poverty and savagery and being saved by westernized culture, by Western culture. And now, I don't know about anybody else. If I was confused or unsure before, there is a 10x of certainty right now, because I know for a fact we live in a world where people, especially in power, just don't write things for the sake of just writing them. There has to be evidence to support this, a lot of it, before you put it into a memo to a president. The question now is, what is that evidence? And what does the full picture look like? I don't know if I want to be able to see that in my lifetime. You know, I don't know if I have the resources to even devote the rest of my life to trying to figure that out. But there is definitely some reintroduction I need to do to my culture, you know, and some intentional preparation for my children to be connected to it, and not just say my dad was or my dad is. I want my children to be able to say I am Igbo, as well as, you know, embracing their Indian heritage as well, you know, and their Trinidadian heritage. But I also want them to know, you know, there's a good chance there's even more of that Igbo blood in you in Trinidad, but at minimum, from your father's bloodline, you are Igbo, and highly likely, if not definitively, from the house of God. You know, one of the sons of Jacob. That's powerful. It literally deconstructs everything that I've ever been taught. Even worse, everything that I've ever taught in social studies class. Everything that I've ever thought about faith and religion and culture. But it's exciting. It's extremely exciting. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Right now it's 10:50. And I did have the line open earlier. I didn't intend to have the line open. But this evening was going to be more of a monologue. I don't know if I have the wherewithal right now to engage in conversation, but this might be something that that might be brought up again in future episodes. Because again, I know for a fact I'm not the only one, you know. And I'll say this for those of you who are like, oh, he's just being all about Igbos. Listen, this last 10 minutes, I'm gonna say something that I'm very proud to say. And I think I shared this in a previous podcast. I am very proud to be Igbo. Very, very proud. Listen, I love my stockfish. I love my akpu, my egusi soup, my bono. You know what I'm saying? I love kolanut. I love alligator pepper. I love, cassava. You know, cassava and agidi. Like all these. I know I'm being a fat ass right now, but everything I'm saying is all about food. But I also love the music. I love going to functions and seeing all our women in their rapa and their George and their elaborate headscarves. I love to see the men come out and they're loud. Igbo men are loud for no reason. We're just loud for no reason. Even right now, I'll be in my office doing work and my office asking me like, is everything okay? I'm like, no, what happened? She's like, you sound like you're arguing with somebody. No, I'm having a business meeting. And for whatever reason, I'm just loud. It's part of the culture. It's in our DNA, you know. We're very argumentative people. I love all this about my Igbo-ness. But what's interesting is, and I shared this before, I did my African ancestry, my African ancestry, right, DNA test, because I figured doing everything else like 23andMe and all the other stuff wouldn't make any sense because I already know where I'm from. I've been to my father's compound. I've been to my mother's compound. I know I know where we are, and you know. So I did the African DNA because I was just curious. Man, when that sucker came back because everything is lined by, because you know with the one line that doesn't change is the mitochondrial DNA, but it comes from your mother. You know, it's all just double X's. You get one of those X's, so they're able to trace back as far as possible to the oldest matriarch on both lines of the family. So I know for a fact, you know, my father's, you know, guaranteed, you know, we're Igbos. My mother too, from my father's from Owerri. But when the African ancestry came back, on my father's side, the oldest matriarch goes back to a Yoruba woman. I was like, God damn. I was like, okay. So on my father's side, the oldest woman they were able to tap into the cluster around was not an Igbo woman, was a Yoruba woman who must have married an Igbo man. So remember what I said, always wandering Jews of Africa. So my wandering ancestor on my father's side, you know, wandered himself into Yoruba land and found him a Yoruba beauty, you know, who is my great grandmother, right? So I was like, damn, okay, so I got Yoruba blood in me. I'm loving it. You know, Omo Yoruba. I'm loving this, right? Kilonshe. Then I opened the envelope on my mother's side. The eldest matriarch on my mother's side, my mother's an Igbo woman too, but the oldest matriarch, Hausa. I was like, Sanu. I was like, yo, this is dope. Because to show the diversity of cultures, how we all connected to each other, you know? And the thing is this, check this out. Hausas, mostly Muslims, you know, but Islam started at a certain point. So we don't quite know, or we can't surmise what they might have been before the influence of Islam. But one thing that's very, very true is that Hausas are considered Semitic because their language is Chadic, and Chadic is a Semitic language. the same Semitism that's utilized by Jews in fighting anti-Semitism. So Hausas are of the Semitic people, right? Just like the Hebrews. Question is there a connection there? I don't know. I'm not a Semitic language or culture, researcher, right? But then the other thing too about Yoruba people, much older presence in West Africa by centuries before Igbos, because there's research and what's his name, Emir Sokoto, Muhammad. It slips my mind. There's documentation where he said that those Igbo tribes, they're not native to our land. So he even said the Igbos are not native. So that whole wandering thing. But now the Yorubas, they've done research to show that they are much older in the land, but came by way of Yemen from what we call the Middle East right now, which is still really Africa, let's call it what it is, and made their way over centuries, and are also considered to be originally one of the scattered tribes of Israel. And one thing that I thought was interesting, they said Yoruba, that Y, it's a derivative of one of the kings, the Jewish kings in that era, and the Yoruba people are named after him. There's a lot of research about that, and again, I'm just giving you very, very loose stuff that I've read, but I'm thinking this is very, very interesting, because we're not talking about like somebody saying like, well, we're talking about researchers who are saying there's a high probability and high likely evidence that this is what the case is. So talk about loving my Nigerianness, not just being Igbo. I am Hausa descendant-wise on my mother's side. I'm Yoruba descendant-wise on my father's side. But I'm Igbo because it was Igbo men who married these women, the fine Yoruba woman, the Yoruba queen, and then the princess Amira from the Hausa people, all to create who I am today. And there's a high likelihood if you're Nigerian, you probably have the exact same story. I just pray that we're able to put it all together in my lifetime so I can really appreciate who we really are, not for world recognition or anything like that, but I think at minimum, something like this, I don't know about y'all, brings me closer to understanding God. I'm not talking about God as far as the son of Jacob, but God, G-O-D, our creator. Because no matter how much I try to get away from it, I am a man of faith. And it's just that my faith has always been torn between Christianity, Islam, and all this, and my Africanness and Europeanness and all these different things. And now I'm in the realization that I don't have to be torn because it was already mine to begin with. I just have to rediscover it. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you so much for indulging me this evening in this conversation. Much love, much respect. Be well. And I'm going to do it. Shalom or salam. Peace. Until next time. All right, y'all.
And now he's been promoted. His job, principal.